Bonjour. Je pense que cette vidéo que j'ai réalisée en anglais est très importante pour le public français. Merci de la regarder. Et si vous ne comprenez pas l'anglais, veuillez appuyer sur le bouton de traduction. Merci. Today, I want to talk about French President Macron. And I want to talk about something that nobody talks about. Everybody's talking about the fact that he is running ahead of every parade and wanting to recognize a Palestinian state in September, a state that doesn't exist. A Palestinian state doesn't exist. He's running ahead of everybody. Everybody's condemning him. America, Germany, England said, what are you doing? You're rewarding Hamas for the atrocities they did on October 7th, 23, when they came across the border and started this Israeli-Gaza war. What are you doing? Everybody's addressing it politically. What they're not addressing it is psychologically. Macron is a victim of child sexual abuse, and that explains everything.
Simcha Sessions, out-of-the-box insights into history, religion, and politics.
French President Macron has made headlines again, this time by recognizing a Palestinian state that doesn't exist. In September, he's going to recognize at the UN, he says, the Palestinian state that doesn't exist. He wants to reward Hamas for initiating that war, that terrible war that started on October 7, 2023 with Israel. For some kind of moral reasons, he wants to be the first to identify with Hamas and recognize a Palestinian state that they're not even asking for. Is this for high ethical reasons? No. What nobody is saying is that it's because he is a child victim of sexual abuse. He was abused sexually by his teacher when he was 14 years old. His teacher's name is Brigitte. She's his wife, and she's the first lady of France. They met at a private Jesuit school that Macron's parents sent him to get a good education. Instead, what he got is sexual abuse. He was 14. He was in her class. She was 39. Brigitte was 39 years old, and his drama teacher, she was married with 3 children, one older than Macron, one younger than Macron, and one in his class. When she started a sexual relationship with him, by her own admission, she says they held off consummating until he was 15. Why? Because at the time, the age of consent in France was backward that way, was 15. The age of consent was 15 then. Today, she would be considered in France, as she would have been considered in the rest of the world then, in 1991, 1992, a statutory rapist, a rapist. She would have been sent to jail anywhere else in the world. Today, if she did this in France, she would face 10 to 30 years in jail, because it's one thing to be an abuser. It's still even a worse crime to be an abuser who is in a position of authority, clergy, parent, teacher. This is the First Lady of France. He is a victim of child sexual abuse. He married his abuser. That's not unusual. It's well documented. It happened in the United States, an infamous case where a woman got pregnant by, she was a teacher, he's her student, she got pregnant by her student who was like 12, 13 years old. She went to jail. She came out, he married her. They had another kid. This happens over and over again, that the victim of child abuse, of sexual abuse, identifies as a way of dealing with the trauma with the abuser. This is related also to what they call the Stockholm Syndrome, where people that are taken hostage identify with the hostage takers. People that are raped identify with the rapist. He fell in love with me. I mean, this happens over and over again. And there's even documented cases of damage to their brains because these children are in a developmental phase, and this trauma creates frontal lobe damage, which impacts on their ability to make rational decisions even as adults. We see this, by the way, in people who survive cult sexual abuse. Their children, sometimes the daughter of the cult leader, and they come out again and they marry the abuser. They have children with the abuser. French President Macron is a classic example of someone in trauma as a result of being sexually abused by his teacher as a 14, 15-year-old. How does that impact on his policies? He identifies with abusers. He identifies basically with the bad guys. That's how he resolved his problem. It's not just he doesn't resolve his problem. He's still working it out, but he tries to resolve his problem by marrying his abuser and by supporting abusers, generally. In France, for example, 30% of all hate crimes are directed at Christians. Churches are burnt, stained glass is destroyed, priests are threatened. Who's doing the abuse? Muslim extremists. Who is least impacted by this abuse? Muslims. 6 to 7% of hate crimes in France are directed against Muslims. Everybody is very wary of Islamophobia. 30% against Christians. This represents 90% of all hate crimes in Europe happen in France under Macron. Not to speak of Jews. Jews are victims of 65% of hate crimes in France. But he doesn't care, Macron. He identifies with the abuser over and over and over again. And he still lives it. We recently saw it. He was getting off on an airplane with his wife, the abuser, and they opened the door before she realized, and she was shoving her hand into his face. This is who he identifies with. He called it a love tap. That's what abused children call the abuse. They're just kidding around. And now what does he do? He takes it a step further. Hamas came across the border with Israel, and they decapitated, and they murdered, and they raped at gunpoint. Who does he want to reward? Who does he, side with? The victims of the rape? No. The hostages? No. He doesn't say, I'll recognize your state, which doesn't exist, if you let the hostages go. Do something. Put your guns down so the war can end. Do something. Let some dead bodies go so that their families, their Jewish Israeli families, can bury them. He doesn't set any conditions. He identifies with the rapists. He wants to reward them. So people rightly are attacking his politics, but people aren't talking about his psychological state as a victim of child sexual abuse. He should be condemned politically, but psychologically, he should be helped. Hopefully now, this issue will be covered, now that I put it on YouTube. And if you like this out-of-the-box analysis, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.